Well, dude, this is such a pleasure for me. I was talking to my buddy Dave Vabora, who's one of your best friends.
Yep.
And Dave's one of the guys I just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with. And he told me, I was telling him I was doing this interview, and he said, dude, you've got to ask him all the hardest questions.
I'm sure Dave would say that.
And this is
amazing.
It's pretty phenomenal.
I can't believe it, man. It was such a small world that you guys were literally just on Kilimanjaro a week ago. Or
about 2 weeks ago, we got back. Yeah.
Wild. And in the same group, too.
Yeah.
And now here we are sitting together.
Sitting together here in Utah. It's just pretty funny to me. Well, it's funny because, I mean, your story is such an inspirational one. And for those that have never climbed a high mountain or climbed something like Mount Kilimanjaro, I think it's hard to put into context just how difficult that was. But we had Marines that had to turn back. I mean, I think 43% of the people that attempt to climb it end up having to go back.
Right.
And you literally, for those that, are familiarizing themselves with you for the first time, you were born without your arms and legs, your forelimbs. And what's it called? It's called congenital amputation.
Yeah.
And so before we kind of back up into your story, you have now climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. You've won 2 ESPY awards for what you've actually climbed Aconcagua, which is insane, which is harder than Mount Kilimanjaro. For those that don't know, it's the highest peak in South America. Give us a little idea of some of the other things that
you've different at least than Kili. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. Right?
Isn't it like ice though the whole time? Like, how do you even?
It was icy. It's just steep.
Oh, okay.
So you remember your summit day and how steep that was? It's like that the whole time.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, summit day was one of the hardest days, probably the hardest day of my entire life physically. So I can only imagine doing that. But
it's a shorter trail though too. With Kilimanjaro, it's a 25, some odd mile, 30-mile trip. And to give people kind of an idea that are listening or watching this, and haven't seen my story, then like when I climb, I'm bear crawling. So it's custom kind of carbon fiber shoe that some amazing people made for me. Originally, when I started, my friends were helping duct tape bath towels on my arms and feet, and that was my first pair of hiking shoes. So the carbon fiber shoe I used to bear crawl. And so the distance was really hard with Kilimanjaro. The altitude and the steepness was really hard with Aconcagua, but everything has its different tests. I know you've had my buddy Jordan Romero on.
Yeah, he climbed Mount Everest at 13 years old. Was one of our previous guests on the podcast. Just insane. I get so inspired. And you've had the opportunity now to inspire so many people. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, who inspires you? I mean, you inspire so many people. Now, who is it that you kind of look to for your own inspiration?
I think I'm pretty lucky in regards to the fact that, my group of friends inspire me a lot. Dave Vabora, who you mentioned, is one of them. Some of my best friends were, former SEALs and, run nonprofits. Friend Melissa here with me today. I know you guys are going to talk in a bit. She's inspires me with what she does. And I'm inspired by the people that I'm around more than anything. And I would say that. And then the other side of it is like most of the people that I learned from died a long time ago.
Dude, I love that. Well, one quote that you said I wrote down is, to know our limits, we have to test our limits. And that's kind of what I think, backing now up into your story, when you were born, your parents kind of had this idea, from what I've gathered from listening to other interviews and stuff that you've done, is they basically just said, we're just going to treat him just like any other kid and let him kind of figure it out. Yeah. And your grandma had some great advice for you too, because I think one of the hard parts is when you're little kids, right? A lot of times, I'm sure you dealt with this all the time, is people just see something they're not used to and they can't help themselves, but they're going to stare and they're going to say something and things like that. And so your grandma told you, what was the advice that she gave you that you talked about?
She would take me grocery shopping with her, and we would just go up and down the aisles of the grocery store and practice meeting people. And if you were there minding your business, shopping for groceries in the aisle, then we'd push the cart up next to you, and I'd reach out and shake your hand, and she'd say, or she'd introduce herself. She'd say, "Hi, my name's Betty. This is my grandson." And I'd say, "Hi, I'm Kyle." And she said, when people hear your voice and they see your face and they shake your hand, the disability will fade away.
Wow. What a blessing to have, those people that helped you become the character, develop the character that you have today.
And I wouldn't be a fraction of who I am without her influence. Like she knew that, and my grandpa too, my parents, but really in that we had a special bond, Grandma Betty and I. I mean, that's, I think that she knew how hard it would be to, just to be in the world. And if I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin, and that's for anybody, right? But you tack on a more visually obvious physical disability with that, and it becomes even that much more intense.
Right.
And so in a way, though, what was a curse when I was younger, now I'd say is kind of my biggest blessing. It's like if we were to spend time walking down the street together, you see people are usually way nicer to me than they are to most people.
It is kind of interesting. I think, and you've said that a lot, is, this is the biggest blessing I've ever had, was being born without my limbs, because of all the opportunities it's brought you and the amount of different conversations about love and empathy and these different things maybe that have been a part of your life, and why you've been able to inspire so many people. One of the stories that you talked about was that there was a couple of veterans that had experienced...
They're in a dark place.
Yeah, they were in a very dark place as well. And they were very touched by your story. Tell us a little bit about how that affected you. You talk about that, I know, in your speaking.
Yeah, I was, when I first started speaking, I didn't really feel worthy of it. And I was making a ton of excuses myself early on, and I wasn't really taking care of myself. I was traveling nonstop, and I was alone. So it was kind of lonely. And I don't know, I became this depressed motivational speaker, and I was ready to quit. And I was talking to my mom in the airport on the way. I was I believe in Indianapolis, and I told my mom that I was ready to quit and go back to school or whatever. And she said, whatever you decide to do is whatever, but you need to make a decision. And then I got to the airport that day, and I went through security, and I saw there was a couple guys that were looking at me, and I went over to shake their hand, and I saw that one of them had sustained pretty bad burns. And but I noticed both of them had, and then I heard their story, and that they had been in an ambush in Iraq, and they had sustained bad burn injuries, and for I've gotten to know now a lot of people with burn injuries, and burn injuries in particular, there might not be a more physically painful thing. I don't know. There's a lot of painful things to experience in this life, but like a burn itself is really psychologically, emotionally, physically is really hard. And they told me there that they'd seen my story on TV, and that helped them get through some really dark times, and that completely reframed it for me and just changed my perspective. And I thought, I was literally thinking, like I was having this pity party for myself, at the same time. That's the interconnectedness of it all. It's just absolutely wild, right? Like we can make a difference in people's lives, and it's not about always having the biggest or best platform. It's not about having the most likes on Instagram. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about the depth of the connection of those people that are listening to this, that might their life might go a different way because of something that you said or something that one of your guests said.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when I first started doing this, you have the reasons why you're doing it. You think you know why you're doing it. And for me, when I first started, it was like I wanted to build a platform. I wanted to, have a voice and share these amazing relationships that I had. But it was not until I started getting feedback from people that were listening, right? And one guy's like, dude, I listened to this episode and I'm going back to college because I know I need to do more with my life. You start to get that real-time feedback where it's somebody listened to something you put together, and all of a sudden their life improved drastically in these different ways. And it gets pretty addicting, right? And so I think that's probably what you experienced. And I kind of
a lot of addictions, but that's a good addiction, though.
Sure.
Of all things to be addicted to, there could be worse.
Yeah. No, it's just, I love that. And I think that is that imposter syndrome. We all feel a little bit of like, am I worthy of this, right? Am I worthy to, am I even making a difference? Like, what am I, like, who am I? Because we all know ourselves. We know our darkest thoughts, and we know our doubts of our own selves. And so I think for me, it's overcoming that and realizing that pretty much anybody that you get to know on a deep level has these same human experiences.
True, yeah, and usually everybody does.
Right.
And it's the people that pretend that they don't, that I feel for them. because I know that they do.
Yeah.
And they don't share it. And that's a prison itself too. You know, there's freedom in talking and expressing openly and honestly and truthfully. It's hard, you know. I for a long time harbored a lot of shame and guilt for the fact that 10 years old I wanted to take my life. And it's crazy. I know that there are other 10-year-olds in the world that are thinking that and doing that now, and that I cannot express to you how amazing of an adventure my life has been today, and how that the time period there felt so permanent and so real. And it's just, it never is though. It always passes. But you know, the arrow of time moves one way, and yet the direction of our lives, of the growth or recession, can move both ways.
Yeah, I think that's part of the growth of, like, once you have a bird's eye view of your own life, because in those moments when you're feeling down, like, you just think like, how does this end? How do I come out of this? How does this eventually get to a good spot? And then you're able to look back, and it's almost like you almost want to laugh. You're like, I was so worried about all those things, and my life is okay. Like, I'm here and life's good. And it's like, I made it through all those worries, all those stresses of school or whatever it was, right? Of relationships and everything. And then you get to a spot and you just look back and you go, this whole mess of a life is kind of a beautiful thing.
I think it was Mark Twain who said, I've suffered so many terrible atrocities in my life, most of which never occurred.
I love that. Well, I want to talk about, I mean, when you were born, you, your parents, there's so many fun videos watching you as you learn, and you're playing with your toys and you're doing all these different things. At what point did you, like, was there ever a point where you realized, like, because you were like, I'm going to play football, I want to wrestle. I mean, was there anything that ever held you back, or were you always just like, in your mind, I'm doing this, I'm going to do whatever I want? And because you've done more in your life than 99.9% of the people I know now. And I mean, where does that come from? Was that something that you just had that as a kid, or was that developed through over time?
I don't know. I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I mean, kids don't know any different, and that's part of the beauty of it, right? And that I think there's the innocence there, and when you're just a kid and you're just playing and you don't know any different, then you don't know of the limitations yet that the world can put on you. And so that's so much of the freedom that exists there, is just to, I don't know, more and more I want to get back to that state of mind.
Yeah, there's an innocence to us as kids where, like, there is no limits, right? We get told by adults eventually, like, you can't do that or you shouldn't do that. And it's like, most of the time we overcome, like, you can't climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Like, you don't have, you know.
Plenty of people said that.
Mountain. Right, exactly. And next thing you know, you're standing on the top.
Or MMA or whatever it was. I mean, there are people that, you know, all the time, oh, you're going to get killed or this or that or whatever. And the people live in, not everybody, but a lot of people live in a lot of fear. And in the fear then I think results in, I don't know, this is something I've learned from Don Miguel Ruiz. He talks about the kind of scars on our heart. And, you know, if you imagine the scars, they hurt, they're painful. And so then when somebody touches that scar and that wound, and then you want to, like, attack back, right? You want to, and it's, so the fear and the pain itself then causes you to want to go and perpetuate more of that sometimes. And the only way out of that trap is to clean out the wound. And sometimes to clean out the wound, you got to open the wound.
Wow. And
you then, when you flush it out, you clear it out, and then you're free from it. The scar might still be there, but you're free.
Yeah. And the pain's gone.
The pain's gone. And then when somebody touches it, you don't want to kill them.
Right.
Right.
No, that's one of my favorite quotes of all time is the only way you can truly kill hatred is through love, because, you know, you want to kill your enemy, make him your friend, right? Like, I love that quote. It's so simple, but it's when we truly get to a place where we no longer, most people that are inflicting pain is because they're experiencing some kind of pain of their own. So if you can somehow, instead of, you know, inflicting that pain back, find a way to heal the pain, then both people are going to just live in a more beautiful state.
So true, man. You know what? It sounds silly, but I just was reminded of this because I hear the birds chirping outside. The strategy that I have right now to go and heal the pain or deal with the fear, just listen to the birds.
I love that.
and you just listen to the birds chirp and you realize like all the bullshit that we think is so important, it's not.
Yeah. So did you have any pain or any fear, I guess, more a better word, for public speaking? Did you have any fear when you stepped up into the ring to wrestle for the first time? Like,
oh, yeah.
How did you deal with, is it different types of fear for you? Because that's for a lot of people, speaking in front of, thousands and thousands of people would be more fearful than about anything else you could do. But you also, you wrestled in front of, huge groups. You wrestled, in college, I believe, for Georgia, right?
Yeah.
And different things like when
club team. Yeah. But it was still, yeah. No, man, there's a lot of fear there. There's a quote by Custy Amato. He was Tyson's original boxing coach, Mike Tyson's coach. He said, heroes and cowards feel the same fear. Heroes just respond to it differently. And I think that there's some misconception sometimes that we convince ourselves that if we ever get to this point, then we're going to not feel that fear anymore and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But then you kind of, like, once you really start to unpack that and examine it, then you realize that the fear itself is inextricably linked to the feeling of aliveness. And if you don't experience fear, you don't experience aliveness. So in order to feel alive, you have to do things that you feel are, make you afraid. John Paul Sartre said, in order to feel like fully alive, or to feel the fullness of life, or something like that, and then you have to risk your life every now and then. That's just, you coming back from Kilimanjaro. It's a place where being at 19,000 feet is, it's not a normal experience.
No, you feel your body like, hey, we're dying here. Like what's going on?
What's going on? But then you come down, and how grateful were you when you took a shower?
Right. Or just grateful to be at a normal place to get altitude.
Normal place. Yeah. And the further out you go with that, then you come back, and I think it deepens the gratitude that you can have too for things.
Well, I've said this forever, to build true relationships, more than anything, people want to feel alive. They want to feel emotions, whether that's fear or pain, happiness, all these different things. And the more emotion you can bring to life in general, the more alive you're going to feel. And I think it makes for very fascinating people to be around. You want to create emotion.
For sure.
And so doing things like you've done, where you just keep pushing yourself, right? And you get to a point where I know you said that when you were talking, you're speaking a lot, and you said, okay, I want to go push myself. And that's kind of what brought Kilimanjaro to the forefront of your mind in that time. Is that?
Yeah. My friends would run off into the woods when I was younger, and I couldn't follow them. And so ever since I was a kid, I wanted to go to these places where I couldn't go. Kilimanjaro was an aspect of it, but it was also scuba diving, or go in, and we got to with some of my best friends that were had spent a decade in the SEAL teams. We went and retraced the steps of the Spartans, went from Sparta to Thermopylae, and retraced the steps of that. And Western civilization wouldn't exist had it not been for Thermopylae.
Wow.
So there's just kind of one. There's a lot of things that I think just that to me is so much of what life is about, is just creating what life you want to live. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be, or not, it is going to be easy. It's not.
Right. Well, people always, they want to give these reasons why they can't do things, right? Like, I think that's why your story honestly touches people so easily and so much, is because it's like you have every excuse, if you want, to just go, you know what, I don't have to try that. Like, I don't have arms and legs. I don't have to try to do that thing. But you're the opposite.
Those excuses are the prison, though.
They are, exactly.
And it concerns me too, because what's occurring right now in the world, I think, even, to take it at like a, I don't know, level of, what am I trying to say? So if you look at like certain things are just like a millimeter thick, race and gender and a lot of things like that, even like religion, like people just like, they keep like the things like a millimeter thick. And there's just not this deeper core understanding of who you are in your heart and your soul. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said the line of good and evil runs down every human heart. Like it does. It's true. It's not It's not caught up in one thing that's just like, this person is this, right? And not all people who are quad amputees are good people or whatever, right? It doesn't make me a good person or bad person because of the way that I was born, or, you know, not all people who do podcasts are good people or bad people, right? But it's every one of us, though, like that is our journey, is to know that line within our own heart, and then to figure that out. And the only way to go and do that is to go and look at yourself. And the only way to go and look at yourself is to be unafraid of seeing what you're going to go and see, because it's not so good sometimes. And that shadow exists within all of us, but that shadow is an aspect of it. So it's not something to be taken away, not something to be like suppressed. It's to be integrated into who we are. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned in the last couple of years is to listen to people. Listen, and don't just put out your judgments or opinions or your predisposition of whatever it is that person is. Like, really hear them. And you'll hear a lot of excuses, and you'll hear them from yourself too if you really listen. But at the same time, you'll hear deeper truths that people will share. You'll hear gifts of wisdom that might come from, I hold superstitions that I can learn as much or more from the busboy at a restaurant than I can from a president.
Yeah.
And you know, if you do that, man, I'm telling you, like, you know, it becomes wild. You've had so much practice and, you know, 150 hours of listening.
Well, it's funny because when I started doing the podcast, I would talk like in normal conversation, and you're not listening all the time, right? But you play it back and you listen to yourself, and all of a sudden you're like, shoot, I cut that person off. I wasn't listening when I should have been listening, but I was so worried about needing to say something that I wasn't listening. And so it has been a gift for me doing the podcast, because you really learn to get a lot more information when you just sit and listen to other people. There's a book called The Anatomy of Peace. I don't know if you've ever read it or not.
No.
And it talks about, one thing that you said that made me think of this is, we tend to put everything through our own lens of our life. It's all we know. Our own experience is our human experience. And so we make judgments on other people, like you kind of said about, you know, some people will only meet a small group of whatever other ethnic or minority group or whatever religion, whatever it might be. And so they have this lens on of seeing everybody with that background through that lens. And you have to kind of get to this point where, if you can truly understand that everybody is dealing with their own set of, like, you can't put your judgments on anybody because you haven't had the life they've had. Your experience is just the one that you're seeing through. And when you can see people with that different lens, it's just a very loving experience, as opposed to, because people act a certain way because of the filter that they've had, it, which has been their life.
That's all they've known.
Yeah.
The map is not the territory. That concept changed my life when I learned it. But so the map is not the territory means, you know, that the territory, if we were to make a map of this neighborhood, then there's just the territory. There's a territory of this neighborhood that we're in right now. Mm-hmm. Of the houses and all of the details, everything, every little blade of grass is part of the territory of this neighborhood. Yet there's a map that we could go and create. If we had an hour to go and create that map, it's going to be semi-effective of like the broad strokes of it, but it's not going to be down to the granular detail levels of it. But the map is never the territory. And that's the thing to go and get and understand, is that, and if we can see that the map is never the territory, then it opens us up to go and discover more and more of what the territory actually is, instead of thinking that we've already arrived at those conclusions and those answers to have it all figured out. And because it's infinite depth of more and more to go and figure out. But there are some crappy maps. Right?
Right. People have been dealt some bad maps.
Maybe they
built bad maps.
Bad territory.
Okay.
They've maybe created, you know, or what we would determine as a bad territory. The territory of being born without arms and legs is like, that's, you know, the territory that I was born with. The map for some people would say that that's bad. The map for others said, you know, like my family, thankfully, what can we go and do with this? So the map then, though, that allowed me to go and navigate my life in a much more effective way than it would have been had it been from that crappy map that was limited. So the map is important. But you are the mental map maker. You are the cartographer.
Yeah, we decide how to take any situation, decide what to do with it, right? I think that's the Viktor Frankl quote where he says, the last of one's human freedoms that you can't take away from me is how I choose to respond in any given situation.
Any given situation. And think about Viktor Frankl, too. He was in hell, on earth, in Auschwitz, but trained as an Austrian, psychotherapist, right? Mm-hmm. Grew up among the ranks of, Freud and Jung and all of the, the psychotherapists there and logotherapy. He was able to go and take what he learned there to be able to go and help others and apply it. That to me is the greatest map, is when people go and take what their experiences are and they're able to go and do something with it, even if they're in hell.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Like I was in hell last year, and Dr. Jordan Peterson helped me out of hell. And I was in hell because I was just so caught up in thinking of these things of what I should be doing and blah, 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 and all this stuff. There's a lot of factors that led to it, but I was down and out for 4 or 5 months. I didn't call Dave Vabora back other friends of mine. I was non-communicative, and I'd done all this stuff. I'd been to all these heights, but then all of a sudden I'm in this place then just re-examining everything that I thought that I knew. But I gained, the deeper that you grow the roots in hell, the higher you're able to climb to the heights of heaven. Every tribal group around the world had a conception of the tree of life that connected heaven and hell. It's a universal symbol. And the deeper the roots that we can grow in hell through, and frankly, the only way to go and do that is through suffering. It's through fear. It's through confronting the darkness. Allows us to go and climb to the higher heights of heaven.
Was there something, because Jordan Peterson's one of my favorite authors. I gave 100 of his books away for Christmas this year. Just, truth is truth. When you hear it, you know it, right? Was there some lessons in particular that you'd be willing to share that you learned from him? I mean, just such a unique experience to be able to have that one-on-one with somebody like Jordan Peterson.
Well, it wasn't a one-on-one. I actually stalked him down to go and shake his hand to go, and it was very quick. But I mean, I've just studied him, online, right, and he's. Well,
that's such a good lesson, because here I think just because you've had so much cool experiences with one-on-one with all these amazing people, I would just assume when you say that you as one-on-one. But anybody has the ability nowadays in 2019 to get that exact experience that you had through just listening and learning and watching.
Yeah, listening to the conversations with Jordan and Joe were a big part of what helped me. And I mean, the Joe Rogan podcast too, Jordan Peterson's conversations with that. I highly recommend people check that out.
Yeah.
I've done 4 or 5 of them now. But the reason why I think it helped me though too is to see through the nonsense in a lot of things, in terms of I almost got caught up in the fact that maybe, I don't know, maybe just the things that we're talking about of, just the categories that people want to be placed in, right? Mm-hmm. That maybe that was real. Maybe those categories are real. Maybe that some groups are more, and that is, there's a lot of truth to that too, of some people, if you grow up in certain neighborhoods, it's harder statistically to go and get out. 100%.
For sure.
There's no question about that. But then at the same time though, I started thinking about all this stuff and the white privilege or something like that, right? And you go and think about things at that level. And I know people, especially younger girls that have grown up in families that are extremely wealthy, that are in hell. Because it's the comparison, the pressure to go and be something, all of that stuff, the nastiness that people can go and spew, and the pressure to go and look a certain way and be a certain way and to be this smart or this or that or whatever, that can go and crush someone too and send them to the depths of hell. And I felt that for myself. Yeah. And the other side of it is that I had let myself go, and I didn't know what I wanted to go and do and be, and and a lot of it, and I had experienced this massive growth and took on kind of more risk than I was ready to go and chew last year, and I fell flat on my face, and I had to fire several people in a business that I wanted to go and start and build something, and I didn't even know necessarily what it was entirely, and I just had this faith that I'd be able to go and do it, but I I wasn't patient, and I wasn't strategic. I wasn't executing, and I fell flat on my face. And so then I just separated from everything. And I literally just took 4 or 5 months to go and read, Frankl and all the existentialists, Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and Jung. And then the thing that he said, though, that Dr. Peterson said that really helped me a ton was the fact that he said he said that growth is not linear. It's not always just this upward trajectory. It's not always this thing where I'm just going to go and I'm going to go and grow and now I'm just going to go. No, it can be messy and ugly and, and feel cruel and unusual. And like this plane of existence that we live in, I think is very much suited for that. And it also too, like, I spent most of my 20s as an atheist, or at least angry at God, because, all the people that I felt like talked about religion just missed the point. They missed the mark. They misunderstood it. And Dr. Peterson reframed it in a way, though, that that blew my mind. He talked, and from him I learned about harmatia.
Go into that a little bit.
So harmatia is sin. It's the Greek word for sin. So if you look in the New Testament, sin is the Greek word sin. It's an archery term. Harmatia is an archery term. It's a Greek archery term. It literally, all it means is miss the mark. That's it. Like the shame and the guilt and all that stuff. And so I started thinking about this and conceptualizing this, and it was like, it's also, there's more than one way to miss the mark. So if you look at like lust as a sin, right? I've seen lust destroy people's lives. And I've had moments in time where it's destroyed mine or it's made my life worse, right? I missed the mark in terms of that. But the opposite of lust, the inverse of it, is impotence. And to be impotent is not to hit the mark. So if we are the archers of our own life, and we are aiming at that target, then we have to, as individuals, and this is another thing I learned from him too, is really like the thing that Western civilization has gotten so right is the conception of the individual. And that as an individual, we can go and then define what it is that we are aiming at. And so if someone, I believe that we've evolved and that the universe has evolved over billions of years, but other people who follow the message that Christ taught might not. That's fine. Other people might think that it's, a sin to have sex outside of marriage. I don't. I feel as though if it's a sin to, like, for me, it's to miss the mark is to lie, to cheat, to steal, to hurt someone, to cause and inflict pain. Like, that's missing the mark for sure. It's also missing the mark if I'm not fully preparing myself to turn myself into being as strong as I can be in moments where I'm tested. Well,
you start to look at sin as such a different word when you think about it as miss the mark, right? Because it's no longer this black and white, right or wrong thing. It's more so, do I have my aim set?
Do I have my aim set?
And am I going towards
Am I going to hit it?
Right.
And depending on how good I am at hitting it, that's going to depend on how effective I am at what it is that I set out to go and do. And if your aim is true, and it's true that, I do believe that there are deeper truths. But those deeper truths are truths that we discover. We discover it through our lives, and we learn about it more. We don't, No,
I love that. And I love the concept of, I think too often people get so caught up in letting someone else define what they need to be aiming at. And then when they don't hit that, well, it wasn't authentically what they were trying to do. And so they kind of self-sabotaged in the first place, when in reality, they didn't do the work or take the time to really figure out, what is my purpose of being here on this earth? What is my purpose? Not the purpose of each individual person, because I don't think they're the same. I'm like you. I don't think my definition of sin is much different than it was growing up, right? Like the things that, to me, everything was black and white growing up.
Yeah.
And now
that's the way it was for a long time, right?
For sure.
But I don't think that was the message that was supposed to be. I really don't.
No, I agree.
And I think though it's also the fact, like if you look at, you know, the idea of like sin as death, well, if you miss the mark enough times and you're actually hunting, then you die.
Right?
You starve to death. That's it. So we have evolved as hunters and gatherers. And that's not, you know, like maybe there were more masculine roles and more feminine roles throughout nature, but we were both at different times. And we have forgotten how far and how long and how much suffering it took to go and get us here to our bitchy state.
Well, Jordan Peterson sums that up so well too, right? Like if you haven't ever listened to him, go give it, because he sums up more than anybody. There's these truths of the earth. There just are. Like when you hear him speak about them, you say, yeah, that makes sense. Like there's a evolution that had to occur for us to get to 2019, like you said, in the state that we're in, which in a lot of cases is a bitchy state compared to people in the past.
Well, a lot of people don't. That's the thing though too, is a lot of people, like even in saying this, I haven't talked about publicly as much about the impact that he's had on me, but he's one of the most hated people out there, right? Yeah. So I can't wait to see what this does, because at the same time, like Tyson said, if you're a friend to everyone, you're an enemy to yourself. But at the same time, people don't want to be confronted with their excuses. They don't want to be confronted with where they're falling short or whatever it is. And it's not for me to go and like judge someone else and go and say, this is what, you know, they know, we all know. We all know when we go and talk to ourselves, we know this and that. Sometimes we want to go and put in the effort to go and do something different, and sometimes we don't. But that's okay. It's for each individual to go and make their own conception with that, I think. And you know, it is the role of people who know to be someone who can inspire others to come up and speak their truth and live their truth.
Well, I imagine you've had a unique ability to do that, because people know that you're not going to take any excuses. Like that's one thing that
I used to though, man, because I used to be too patient with people's excuses. On my own, I was too patient with my own excuses. And then that's a big part of what, you know, I quit believing in the message that I was saying. And then I needed to go and have hard truths told to myself, and both by myself and by others. And I mean, in order to, you know, I'm very lucky that, you know, two of my best friends, my brothers, you know, Jeff Gum, Mitch Aguiar, they're former Navy SEALs. You want to talk about people that are going to be, you know, unafraid to give it to you straight. Yeah, they're fearless. They're lions.
Well, I've discovered in life, especially powerful men and successful women, they will honor the person they know is willing to give it to them straight. Because too often they have people that are the hanger-oners, or the people that are kind of fluffing them up or telling them what they want to hear. So they really value the opinion of somebody they have to know they're coming from a place of love. But if they know that, if you truly can get and you know, it's like you said, like when you just stop somebody, go, you know why you did that. Like if it was out of love, we felt it, because the energy of the universe portrays it that way. But if it was, you know, an ego thing, or you're trying to tear somebody down, then they also can feel it that way. But when you truly come from that place of love, like people really do honor somebody that will give them that information that, you know, we probably already know. I love the word affirmation because it means affirm something you already know.
You know, yeah.
But they're affirming
I love that.
something
That's really cool that you said that. I've never thought about it that way. Yeah, it is affirming something that you know to be true.
I always say to people when they come with a BS,
something in you knows it to be true.
Yeah, when somebody gives me a total bullshit excuse, I look at them and I kind of tilt my head and I go, you know.
Ooh, savage.
No, but it's like, and they always, every time I'm like 1,000 for 1,000 on this, they just look at me, they're like, shit, I do know. You know, I already know. And so I love it when people do that to me, because it's like, you know where you're falling short. But, well, I want to, man, I could sit here and talk to you all day. I did not expect to get this deep in the conversation, but you, seriously, man, it's pretty inspirational just being able to, you know, I've been listening to a lot of your interviews the last couple of days as I prepared for this, and just getting so much information. I kind of want to end with this. One thing that you do that is super cool to me is you drive a car full time. Please tell me that, like, all the time when you're driving down the street, you just totally mess with people. Like, throw your arms in the air and wave at them and stuff.
I definitely have had some moments of messing with people. I've had a few people when I'm going through drive-through to go and get my coffee or whatever and see them, whoa, freak out, and like it's awesome. I love, I think so. My favorite historical hero was Quanah Parker. He's the last chief of the Comanches. And he's my biggest hero, one, because they were a worst to first story. They didn't forget where they came from, though. They were basically slaves to the Spanish for 100 years. And then they became the best horse people in the world as slaves to the Spanish. And then when the Spanish vacated the plains of Texas and New Mexico and Oklahoma, then they acquired these Spanish Mustangs and they became the strongest. And it was that technological revolution there. It's all tools, right? And I've had a unique relationship to tools, and even, something like adapting a car, water bottle or, whatever, twisting, cap on, like it's, tools of like, how am I going to do this has always been there. And so in a way, like the Comanche though, they were sneaky. They were real sneaky. And because they looked smaller and weaker, they would let you think that. And they didn't lose a battle for almost 150 years. So they were the dominant force in North America for 150 years, even, like no one messed with them. Point being is appearances are sometimes, different than they may seem. And I absolutely, for that reason, love to screw with people. Any opportunity that I get. Dude,
I love it, man. I love it so much. Well, dude, your whole outlook on life, it's inspiring. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us. And
thank you.
I'm going to keep following your journey, man. If you ever want to do something crazy and no one else wants to go with you, just know you can hit me up. And I tend to be a little bit of an adrenaline junkie and always like a good story. So let me know.
Awesome, man.
Dude, thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.